The winners is Wall Street, $140 billion.
Nancy Skinner, does the federal government have any business telling Wall Street what kind of salaries and bonuses it can pay to its executives when they make a profit? Who, stated differently, who knows more about salaries, the federal government or the people that produce wealth?
Because they are tax-deductible expenses, and that means that, so if they're going to get away with a big tax liability by just giving them money to their employees and not paying their fair share, the middle class and working people have to make up that money to provide the services, the general welfare of the Constitution, Judge. And so it's tax-deductible, therefore it should be limited in some respects.
All right, switching gears. Today, the federal government announced, notwithstanding a decision by Judge Martin Feldman of the United States District Court in New Orleans, which had told them that they could not impose a moratorium. Today, they finally agreed to lift the moratorium. What is that going to do, John? Will drilling resume, or are those drillers gone to somewhere else by now?
I imagine they've gone to somewhere else right now. The U.S. is the last place you'd want to take any risk drilling right now, because you saw what happened with BP. Basically, we had a government that tried to put BP out of business, almost succeeded, and so the last place you'd want to drill isn't a place where success is basically penalized. If you do make a mistake, you could be in trouble. So go elsewhere. We're a world of watching oil.
Charlie, the true libertarians believe that the earth underneath the water should be privately owned, just like other earth is.
I agree.
And then an insurance carrier would make sure that the drilling was done right, because the insurance carrier's assets would be on the hook.
But you have to realize that the environmental laws prevent you from drilling in safer areas. You have to drill way out there, then your liability goes up dramatically.
Hey, Nancy, where's the federal government's deed? Where's the deed the federal government has to prove that it owns all the earth underneath the water that it likes to micromanage?
I got to agree with John. The reason they might not want to drill here in the United States is we have 3% of oil reserves, and we don't have the oil.
Got it.
But the idea that somehow that this moratorium to make sure that another libertarian concept. If that poor BP, John says, they damaged the livelihoods of so many thousands of people.
You're right. We could argue BP all day. Gotta go. Charlie Gasparino, John Tamny, Nancy Skinner, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Next, Glenn on the 40-day, 40-night challenge. And don't miss tomorrow. Glenn will be live from Los Angeles. We'll be right back. Glenn recently hosted a program with a studio audience of Americans who took his 40-day, 40-night challenge. They had so much to say, we kept the cameras rolling after the show, and the audience turned the tables on Glenn. You got to see this. And they asked him questions. Take a look.
You being in the spotlight now, you having so much popularity, what do you do, perhaps on a daily basis, to keep yourself humble, to keep yourself in reverence to God, and so that
I pray on my knees.
That is not transferred onto you?
I have been on my knees 3 times today. Believe me, I pray for gentle reminders of humility. Never ask him to humble you, because he gives that to you with anvils from the sky. But I ask him for that, the Lord is reminding me every day. Believe me, that was the question that I asked a member of my staff about 2 hours ago. I said, am I becoming arrogant? And I do my best to keep myself in check. Thank you for asking. Please pray for that. Phyllis.
There's defining moments in everyone's life. For me, when I was young, it was Kennedy being shot. Then it was 9/11, which I survived. I feel like there's a guardian angel surrounding me all the time. I've been so blessed, and whenever I'm going through the most difficult times in my life, I just say the Serenity Prayer, and I know that everything will be okay, and it is.
It will. It will. Thank you. Jean.
Have you ever war gamed? I mean, with what's going on in our country?
Yes, Jean. I mean, I war game for a living in many ways, and I have some of the best war gamers available. I mean, I've war gamed with people who have war gamed for the Pentagon, I think we have done a good job at looking at many of the possibilities. That doesn't mean they happen, and we don't talk about them on the air necessarily. because, you know, there's a million different things that could happen. And as I have sat down with war gamers, the thing that I've learned the most is there are a million ways for this thing to go awry, and there are very few ways to pull it back from the brink. And that's one of the reasons why the 40-day, 40-night challenge came, because only God, only this country turning back to God, because He's not disinterested. He's not disinterested. Freedom is His, and He may not care about what we've done. He needs freedom on earth to fulfill His purposes. And if we're not the people, He'll wipe us out. I mean, He won't. He'll allow us to wipe ourselves out, and then He'll just find a new group of people, and His purposes won't be thwarted. So if we turn to Him, we'll be good. Yes.
Okay, hi. How about a show about stay-at-home moms who came out for the cause, really strong, homeschooling moms? I know plenty, so many. Like, I'm one. I was a homeschooling mom, just comfortably, quietly.
Good for you.
Educating my children for 17 years.
I tell you what, we may do a show on homeschooling, because my wife homeschools, and she just started. And I have seen the courage that it takes from my wife. She is a humble woman, really smart, but she's grown up with a society that says, oh, well, no, you need a teacher to do that. And she's terrified that she's going to teach the wrong things, and she's not smart enough to do it or whatever. She's had a hard time, because psychologically it's tough to convince yourself that, yeah, you can do it. Yes, okay.
I feel like one of our greatest treasures are our seniors, who are just enjoying life and doing all the fun things, and they could be doing so many things.
Can I tell you something?
Is there any program could be done to activate them?
No, there's not a program, but I'm about to start one. Not an official program, but a challenge, because our greatest resource are the people who have retired. And, you know, moms may be so busy just trying to keep both incomes going, and they can't educate their children. Well, grandma can, and so can grandpa. And we must get them involved. You guys went out and you earned money, and you did it all, and you fought, you did the right thing. You fought in Vietnam. These losers didn't. And here they are again coming to the plate. And it's the last chance for that generation to redeem itself, or redeem them, so to speak. And honestly, our families are so strapped that many can't teach their children because they can't stay at home. But I would have killed to have my grandparents teach me school. I mean, the best memories of my life are with my grandparents. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Ahead on the program, the roots of the 40-day, 40-night challenge, and we'll be right back. Just 3 weeks from the important midterm elections, and the Democrats could lose their hold on Congress. The New York Times writes today, quote, "For Dems, even safe seats are shaky." And billionaire George Soros, you know who he is, he seemed to agree. He funded the Democrats in the last few elections, but not this time, saying he doesn't believe in standing in front of a, quote, avalanche. Is this shaping up to be another 1994? Pat Caddell is a Democratic pollster who once worked for President Jimmy Carter. Juan Williams is the senior correspondent for National Public Radio. Gentlemen, welcome here. Pat, to you first. What do the polls tell you 3 weeks out? Is this doomsday for the Democrats?
It's going to be very, very ugly for the Democrats. It's going to be like an Arctic shower. But but you said something earlier in the program we should understand, Judge. This is a revolt against both parties. The Republicans will benefit because, as I've said since 2009, they are the big red default button. If you want to put the American people's attitude on a bumper strip right now, it is stop the machine in 2010 and get rid of them all by 2012. It is, and so the Democrats are looking at huge losses, and everything they're doing right now seems to be, I think, adding to it rather than detracting.
Juan, do you agree with what Pat just said and the arguments that I made earlier? The reason we have a Tea Party today is because the government, the Republicans proved horribly inept at sticking to Reagan and Goldwater principles when last they ran the government?
Yeah, and I think, you know, and it's also the ethics scandals and the big spending that the Republicans perpetrated during their time. So if you look at the numbers now, Republicans are actually less popular in Congress than Democrats in Congress. But Pat's point is well taken. It's Democrats who are in control, who are in the majority, and therefore they're going to bear the brunt of voter anger at the incumbents and at the system as it stands. But don't mistake that to think that somehow people love Republicans.
Right. Juan, were you surprised when George Soros basically said to the Democrats, you're on their own? I mean, with this recent Supreme Court opinion, he could, in a sophisticated and perfectly lawful way, dump tens of millions into the Democratic campaigns this year.
He could have. And I think this is an interesting point because Soros is a kind of, you know, brand name in terms of Democratic donors, and what you're hearing him say is that he expects an avalanche. So, I mean, forget the polls, look at the money men. And here you have the money man saying, you know what, I don't think this is going to work for the Democrats.
Pat.
Yeah, you say one thing about the money men. Man, they make money decisions. He's looking at this saying, I'm not going to put my money up and get wiped out.
Right.
And I think that's as good as you could see. But remember, he's already done this. And one of the things, Judge, I hope we talk about is this latest move by the president on these attacks on the chamber and on this argument on Roe and on this stuff, which is ludicrous.
We'll go to it right now. And Pat, to you first. Is there any evidence whatsoever? The New York Times says no. The Associated Press says no. That the Republicans are receiving money, whether it's Karl Rove's group or some other group, from foreign governments or foreign corporations.
Let me tell you something. I am really upset. I was the youngest person on Richard Nixon's enemies list. I really don't like it when the government goes after people. This government and this president are disingenuous with how they do this. They made up a charge which is almost McCarthy-like. You know, for a campaign his that took so much money that was not reported, and some of them that may have been reported. But for a president who's responsible for blowing up public financing, which he did, presidential public financing, when he had agreed that he would abide by it, and then when he found out he could make a lot of money, he backed off it to the applause of much of the press. This is unbelievable. But these attacks, this demeaning of the presidency, they are demeaning the presidency. He is attacking smaller people, accusing them of being crooks and other things. I haven't seen this since Richard Nixon in 1970.
Juan, I'm going to guess that in their minds, the reason Vice President Biden made these attacks is to generate enthusiasm amongst the base. Will it even work with their base, where there's no evidence for it whatsoever?
No, you know, this is interesting because I think I have a slight point of difference here with Pat on this. I think that the charge against the chamber is specious because, you know what, they're talking about supposedly foreign contributions because you have companies that are based overseas that pay dues to the chamber, and it's a small percentage, and therefore they say, well, some of that money may get commingled into money the chamber uses in its political activities. I think it's bogus. But here's what's not bogus, Judge. What's not bogus is that under the new campaign finance laws, there are certain groups now that can take money anonymously and put it into candidates. Right. And we're seeing a lot of money coming in on the Republican side in just that way.
Right.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
They did on the Democrats. Look, this has been going on. I'm with you, Juan. We should disclose everything. This has been going on under the law, going on for a long time. To get up and say, oh, it's them, when the Center for American Progress, speaking of George Soros, all the Democratic labor unions, all of these other groups in the last two cycles have also been taking and hiding this money, which I think is wrong.
Got it.
But this is a species, but worse than this is those ads accusing people of mugging women in parking lots, trying to steal the democracy.
None of that stuff is going to work.
And attacking individuals.
The Democratic people who put those ads together should know better.
It's outrageous.
Pat Caddell, Juan Williams.
It's outrageous.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Got it. How's the Supreme Court's next decisions? How their next decisions could affect you next.